My name is Varun Soni. I'm the Dean of Religious Life here at the University of Southern California. Many thanks to Ali Abbas and the Neely Center for organizing such an important and timely conversation with such extraordinary speakers. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with all of you on the topic today of next generation religion and ethics. As Dean of Religious Life at USC, I oversee more student religious groups and more campus chaplains than anyone in the United States. More than 90 student religious groups, more than 60 campus chaplains representing all the world's great religious traditions. We even have a humanist chaplain for secular and atheist students. And I get to do this work on a campus with more international students than almost any other university, in the heart of Los Angeles, the most religiously diverse city in human history. So the opportunities to think deeply about geo-religious diversity, interfaith engagement, and ethics are unparalleled. Over the last 10 years, I've had the extraordinary privilege to walk alongside our students during the most ecstatic and agonizing times of their lives, during the most intense times of triumph and tragedy. My work fully engages the interplay of shadow and light that animates a student's university experience. And every week, I see the full range of human emotions through my confidential work in pastoral care and spiritual counseling. Accordingly, I believe I have been afforded unique insight into the way millennials and post-millennials, or Generation Y and Generation Z, engage the intersection of religion and ethics in their lives. And based on my experience with our students, I have a few ideas about the future of religion and ethics that I'd like to share with you today. But before we get to the future, it's important to look at the present. We are currently witnessing a transformative moment in American religious history. Our nation has been a deeply religious country since its inception, shaped and molded by public Protestantism, as Protestantism has been the majority religion in the United States, a country where most people have been religiously affiliated. However, the American religious landscape is changing before our very eyes. Indeed, we are no longer a majority Protestant country. Just a few years ago, not a lot of people notice this, but just a few years ago, for the first time, Protestants made up less than 50% of our nation. And in a state like California, which is also not majority white, we can no longer say that we have a majority white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture here. And just look at the United States Supreme Court. For most of its history, Supreme Court justices were all Protestants. Eventually, there was a Jewish seat on the Supreme Court, a Catholic seat on the Supreme Court, but it was still majority Protestant. But today, there are no Protestants on the Supreme Court. There is no Protestant seat. All the justices are Catholic or Jewish, so one of the most visible centers of American power in a historically Protestant country has no Protestant representation. The decline in public Protestantism reflects a larger generational trend. That is one of the most significant stories in American religious history, and that is the dramatic rise of those who are not formally affiliated with any religion at all, a group that we call nuns, not N-U-N-S, not Catholic nuns, but nuns, N-O-N-E-S, no religious affiliation at all. According to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, in 1950, 2% of Americans were not formally affiliated with religion, 2%. Today, more than 20% of Americans are not formally affiliated with religion, and nuns, those who are not formally affiliated with religion, make up the fastest growing religious demographic in the country right now. And for young people, Generation Y and Generation Z, nearly 40% are not affiliated. This is dramatic. 2% of their grandparents, 40% of the grandchildren. Dramatic sort of change over just 2 generations. In fact, in the survey we sent out to first-year USC students in the fall, 43% of our incoming students checked the box of non-affiliation. And almost 70% of our students describe themselves as more spiritual than religious, or spiritual but not religious, SBNR. The exponential rise of nuns and SBNRs among people under 30 will dramatically reshape the future of religion in the United States and in the world. That's because we live in a very young world. More than half of the world is under the age of 30. More than 60% of the Muslim world is under the age of 30. More than 60% of India and China are under the age of 30. That means that more than 3 billion people are under the age of 30, and they constitute the most diverse generation in human history, and they will collectively write the story that is the future of religion. Religion has historically been the predominant location where the intergenerational transmission of ethics and values occur for most people in the world. Religion has historically provided a framework for most people in the world to think about their moral responsibilities and spiritual pursuits. Religion has historically been the primary source of identity and community for most people in the world. Religion has historically been the most important place for most people in the world to reflect upon the ultimate questions of meaning and purpose, of significance and authenticity in their lives. And religion has historically offered leadership, counseling, care, and prophetic wisdom for most people in the world. In the age, though, of the non-affiliated, and at a time when most young people consider themselves more spiritual than religious, what is the future of religious community, religious leadership, religious practice, religious teachings, and religion? Is this the end of religion as we know it? Well, people have been predicting the demise of God for a long time now. From Hegel to Nietzsche to Freud to Marx to the secularization thesis, we've been warned before that religion is about to end, and yet it endures, it evolves, it engages. So in my opinion, this profound historical moment does not mark the end of religion or the death of God, because even though there's a rise in young people not affiliated with formal religion, when young people walk away from their faith, that doesn't mean necessarily that they walk away from God, or meaning, or purpose, or transcendence, or community, or service, or ritual, or prayer. It just means that they interpret those things in a different way, in a way that makes sense for them, even if that's different than the way they were raised with those things. And so religion will continue, albeit in a different form, as a location for the transmission of values, community, and leadership. And I believe it will do so through two megatrends that we see playing out in American religion today. The first megatrend in religion is the movement away from organized religion towards personal spirituality. I think of this as a movement away from institutions towards individuals, especially in terms of leadership, as religious institutions will no longer exclusively produce the faith and moral leaders of tomorrow as they have done in the past. How could they, when 80% of mainline Protestant churches in this country are on the verge of collapse, mostly because of dwindling attendance and an aging demographic and the financial implications of that? That means that we will likely lose 200,000 Protestant churches in the United States over the next 20 years. As it is, we're already losing 20 churches a day, and that number will increase over the years. 2/3 of American divinity schools and theological seminaries are about to close because they cannot generate enough tuition to remain financially viable due to the lack of student interest in religious vocations and ordination traditions. And even though evangelicals have long been a powerful political, social, and cultural force in American public life, we know that 65% of American evangelicals will leave their church before they turn 35, and most will never return. I believe that the future religious leaders will not be ordained professionals and clerics, but rather they will be rooted in a universal spirituality that connects people between and within faith traditions. For example, who is the spiritual leader of the United States? I think one could argue that over the last several decades it was Billy Graham, the most popular and influential Christian minister in a majority Christian country. But who is the spiritual leader of America in the age of the nuns and the SBNRs? I argue that America's most important spiritual leader is Oprah Winfrey, because she challenges us to think deeply about the enduring human questions in our lives, the spiritual questions of meaning and purpose and identity. She's a prophetic voice for compassion, reconciliation, empowerment, forgiveness, justice, themes that are central to all religious faiths. But because she has no formal religious training, it allows her to cross over traditional divides of religion, nationality, race, and gender. She has legitimacy for many people precisely because she's not ordained, because she's not formally affiliated with any specific religious tradition, and because she speaks from both a humanist and a theistic perspective. I saw a similar phenomenon when I was appointed Dean of Religious Life here at USC 10 years ago. When I was appointed, all the other deans of religious life around the country were ordained Protestant ministers, and I was a non-ordained Hindu attorney, so USC really thought outside the box with that one. Thank you, President Obama. He was running at the time. I was a beneficiary of hope and change in the air. So even though my career has been in religious life and in religious studies, I don't have a traditional chaplaincy background in the way that my colleagues do. So when the Trojan Family magazine did a story on me, they called it The Unchaplain. The intent was to show that my lack of a traditional chaplaincy background gave me a different perspective and therefore a different legitimacy to the spiritual lives of students. But in no other profession would this fly. Alex Caprone just talked about healthcare and the law. Could you imagine this happening in either of those professions? Here's your surgeon. We call him the non-physician. He has no medical training whatsoever. Here's your attorney, the unattorney, who's never been to law school and never tried a case. Good luck with that. But somehow we can roll out the unchaplain as a positive thing, right? only in this field, because I think of the way people see religious leadership, the shifting nature of religious leadership. So what does this mean for the future of religious leadership? I think it means that our future leaders won't be clerics, but rather they will be other professionals. They will be physicians and educators, artists and activists, musicians and athletes, community organizers and nonprofit leaders, people who speak directly to the human condition in a way that resonates with others across the faith spectrum and inspires them to action around shared beliefs, values, and aspirations. The second megatrend we see with religion in the United States is the rise of an interfaith consciousness. With the rise of the nuns and the SBNRs, and with the increased religious diversity in the United States beyond the Abrahamic fold, through immigrant religions that are now firmly planted in the United States, like Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, Taoism, and the Baha'i faith, we are now at a unique moment in American religious history where young people know more about each other's faiths than ever before. Indeed, 1/3 of all marriages in the United States are interfaith marriages. That means they happen between people of two different faiths. And that number actually starts at 1/2. But over time, one partner will convert to the tradition of their spouse, so it comes down to 1/3. That means that young people's families look like the parliament of the world's religions. I have every major religion represented in my family. It's not just that our young people know someone of a different faith. Now they are related to someone of a different faith. As a result, young people are very comfortable with differences and diversity. They know and love people from across the faith spectrum, and they fully embrace new hybridized and fusion religious identities. For example, in our Interfaith Council, we have students who identify as members of all the major world religions. We also have students who identify as secular humanists. We have students who identify as pagan and Wiccan. We have a student who is part of the Church of the Jedi. It's a real church. We have students who call themselves Zen Christians, part Buddhist, part Christians. I met a student who self-described as sushi. I said, sushi? What's sushi? My mother is Sunni and my father is Shia, so I'm sushi. I was like, all right. We have students who call themselves Hindus. Mother is Hindu, father is Jewish. We have students who call themselves trans-spiritual. I don't know what trans-spiritual means, but I want to be trans-spiritual. More than any other place in American society, colleges and universities are the location where interfaith engagement and religious reconciliation happen. In 2011, I worked with the Obama White House on a campaign to get college and university students to devote 1 year to interfaith community service as a way of commemorating the 10th anniversary of 9/11. We expected 30 to 40 colleges to participate because there was a pretty high barrier to entry with the application process and the project proposal, the sign-off of the president of the university, et cetera. But we got more than 300 schools to participate that first year, 10x what we were expecting, including community colleges, trade schools, police and Air Force academies, seminaries, and other vocational institutes. The Obama White House didn't create an interfaith consciousness in American colleges and universities. Rather, it revealed that consciousness. It legitimized it. It celebrated it. It brought it into the public sphere. But that interfaith consciousness, which is deeply rooted in the values of diversity and inclusion, is very much in the DNA of most colleges and universities in the United States and represents a generational worldview for Gen Y and Gen Z. As Dean of Religious Life, I've been inspired by student leaders at USC who are deeply invested in the powerful idea that their faith traditions can be part of a solution to the world's great crises and not part of the problem. For example, as USC's response to President Obama's challenge, USC students created the Ansar Service Partnership, the first Muslim interfaith community service organization in the United States. Ansar meets every month to serve communities within a 10-mile radius of campus. And every year they host the Fastathon, an event that embodies the power of interfaith community service. For Fastathon, Muslim students fast with non-Muslim students, and local businesses sponsor the students as they fast. Each year, the students end their fast together at USC's Caruso Catholic Center, in an event that is also sponsored by the Muslim Student Union, Hillel, the Hindu Student Organization, and the USC Interfaith Council. Every year, Fastathon raises several thousands of dollars for the Ilm Foundation, which provides much-needed services in support for LA Skid Row community. So the tagline is, go hungry for a day so someone else doesn't have to. This type of deep engagement across fundamental differences that implicates the hard work of translating values into action and of connecting the global and the local can only happen at a research university like ours. And research universities are also the location where the next generation of religious reconciliation occurs, because research universities are where the world's next leaders meet, grow, and form deep relationships with each other. I was reminded of this after the terrorist attacks in Mumbai in 2008. when hundreds of USC students from India and Pakistan came together for an interfaith memorial service. These students read from each other's holy books, lit candles with one another, and embraced each other in solidarity and support. These students would have never met in India. They would have never met in Pakistan, but they met right here at USC, shared a powerful interfaith encounter and experience, and will return, and did return, to their home countries with a new interfaith consciousness. Since then, I've seen students from Israel and Palestine, and students from China and Japan work together on common goals and aspirations. Students who come from countries that are historically antagonistic toward each other, they meet right here at USC and they grow in friendship, thereby proving that our campuses are unique locations for reconciliation and engagement. So what does this all mean for ethics, next generation? I believe that what emerges from the new generation of spiritual leaders, leaders who are extraordinary individuals with an interfaith consciousness, is a universal ethic predicated on inclusion and shared responsibility, an ethic that engages both secularism and science, an ethic that demands that our religious traditions help solve the world's great crises, an ethic that is predicated on well-being, self-care, and flourishing, on gratitude, joy, contemplation, and abundance, an ethic that challenges all of us to translate our faith into action, our values into service, an ethic that imagines compassion not as a noun, but as a verb. I think that's where we're heading. I hope that's where we're heading. But if Hegel, Nietzsche, and Marx can get it wrong, so can I. So let's see what happens. Thank you.